By the end of this lesson, you'll fill your vocabulary with advanced expressions to sound fluent and natural in the workplace. You'll learn 92 business English expressions in the next 40 minutes in this Business English Masterclass. Welcome back to J First English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started. Let's review some vocabulary you can use during job interviews and hiring. You can say, I gave my best elevator pitch when we first met. An elevator pitch, this is a noun, it's a something. It's a short, persuasive summary about yourself or your idea. And when I say short, I mean the time you're in an elevator with someone. So usually 30 or 60 seconds long. You need to introduce yourself, the value you'll provide, what you can do in 30 to 60 seconds. That's an elevator pitch. Or maybe a friend says to you, you should dress the part for a management interview.
He even dressed the part.
So here, to dress the part, this is an idiom, and it means to wear clothing appropriate for a role or situation. So if you're applying for a management position, you're going to wear something different than if you were applying for an assistant position. You have to dress the part. How about this? She really did her homework on the company before the meeting. Now notice here on the company, this is optional. You could just say she really did her homework before the meeting. This is an idiom, to do one's homework. This has nothing to do with an English assignment. This simply means to prepare in advance for any situation by researching. So if you do your homework on a company, you understand the goals of the company, who management is, where they're located, the size, things like that. So when you are interviewing, you can impress them with your knowledge of the company. How about this one? A firm handshake, and a smile create a strong first impression. A first impression. This is, of course, the initial opinion someone forms about you. You always want to make a great first impression. Now, don't worry about taking notes. I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. And hopefully, I'm making a great first impression with you if this is your first time. If not, hopefully you're enjoying this video. So if you are, put that's right, put that's right in the comments. Now let's review this phrase. In an interview, you need to read the room to determine what level of formality to use. This is an important one. This is an idiom, to read the room. This has nothing to do with reading. Remember, idioms have a non-literal meaning. If you read the room, it means you understand the atmosphere and you adjust your behavior accordingly. So if you notice that everyone who is interviewing you is telling jokes, using informal speech, well then you should also be lighthearted, use informal speech, tell a joke if you know one. You need to read the room.
Read the room.
Here's an important one. I sent a follow-up email to thank the recruiter. Now, you can say I sent an email, of course. Adding a follow-up email, this simply is a thank you or a reminder sent after a meeting or interview. So you can send an email anytime, but a follow-up email means that something happened before it, like the interview. So let's say you attend the interview, you get the job, congratulations. So let's move on to some phrases you can use on your first day and during onboarding. So listen to this. The onboarding included a tour and introductions. Onboarding. This is the process of introducing a new employee to the company. So it's when you meet people, you understand the culture, you learn the policies, you fill out all the forms, you get your security pass, your parking pass, all of that is involved in onboarding. Or how about this? There were some icebreakers during orientation or during onboarding. Orientation is a replacement word. Now, icebreakers, that represents an activity or a game to help people feel comfortable in a group. So it's commonly done when people are meeting for the first time, or even when people who have met before start a meeting, or even at a party. You have some icebreakers.
How about an icebreaker?
How about this? The office has a business casual dress code. You definitely need to know the dress code. You can ask that during onboarding or during orientation. So the dress code, this represents the rules about what employees can wear at work. So maybe at your office, for some reason, you're not allowed to wear bright colors. You have to wear black. That would be part of the dress code. Here's a common one. Senior management hosted a meet and greet for new hires.
So first up, meet and greet.
A meet and greet. Notice how I pronounced "an." When you have "an" between two nouns or two verbs, you can pronounce it just as meet and greet. You can absolutely say meet and greet, but that's not how a native would say it. A native would say meet and greet, meet and greet. This is an informal session where people introduce themselves. So they meet for the first time and they greet each other. That's a meet and greet. Now, in the first few days or months of joining a company, you might say, I'm still learning the ropes in my department. Do you know this one? This is an idiom to learn the ropes. It means to learn how a job or system works. You need to learn the ropes. Now, we already reviewed this, but just again, she made a good impression by arriving early. So before we focused on just first impression, but notice you can also make and then any adjective impression. And this, in the positive, means to create a positive opinion early on. So impression represents opinion, but you can also make a terrible impression by arriving late and not following the dress code, not dressing the part. So you want to make a positive impression. Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson. Now let's review some phrases for asking for or offering help. You may know this one. Can you give me a hand? Can you give me a hand with these reports? So to give someone a hand, this means to help with a task. Can you give me a hand with, and then you specify the something.
Can you give me a hand?
How about this one? Could you point me in the right direction for the budget file? Do you know this one? To point someone in the right direction. This is very commonly used, and it means to show or guide someone toward the correct way or place. It's often used in giving directions. Can you point me in the direction of the museum? Can you show me where the museum is? But you can also use it in the workplace to represent a task or a process. How about this one? Can you back me up during the meeting? Ooh, do you know this one? To back someone up, can you back me up? Can you back her up? So you need that someone up. This means to support someone's idea or statement. So if I ask you to back me up, it sounds like I'm going to share a new idea or suggest a change in the meeting, and I want you to say, that's a good idea, or yes, we should consider that. Here's a must-know phrase. My boss walked me through the new software process. So to walk someone through something. In this case, the something was the new software process. And this simply means to explain. Can you explain? But you do it step by step. So it sounds like I want an in-depth explanation. It's extremely commonly used in a workplace situation. This is also a great one to know. Can you cover for me? Can you cover for me while I'm at lunch? So to cover for someone. This means to do someone's work temporarily. Well, in this case is while the person is at lunch. So if you work in a restaurant and you're a server, and you want to go eat something because you're really hungry, but you have tables that are waiting for food, waiting for water, waiting for the bill. So you would ask another coworker to cover for you. This is also extremely common. Keep me in the loop about or on the project changes.
Please keep me in the loop.
So there are two acceptable prepositions, about or on. It doesn't matter which one you use. To keep someone in the loop means to share updates or information about something. Let's review some phrases you can use while participating in meetings. Maybe you say to someone, or you hear your boss say, feel free to chime in if you have any ideas. Feel free to chime in, extremely common. This means to join or add to a conversation. So it's another way of saying feel free to share. Feel free to share any ideas you have. Feel free to chime in. Or maybe someone says, let's make sure we're on the same page before moving on. You may know this one, to be on the same page. If you're on the same page as someone, it means you have the same understanding or agreement.
We're on the same page.
So you both agree that you should cancel the event. You're on the same page. Here's a great one. She took the floor to explain the plan. To take the floor. You'll hear this a lot, especially if there are many people in a meeting, and it means to begin speaking to a group. So when someone takes the floor, it means now it is that person's turn to either formally present or just informally share their ideas. Here's one you should know. I'd like to raise a point about the deadline. So to raise a point, this means to bring up an idea or concern. Now, if people are talking about the deadline, you can say, I'd like to chime in about the deadline. I'd like to share my opinion. But in this case, you can also say, I'd like to raise a point. And in that meeting, you're going to be waiting for your boss or the person leading the meeting to say, let's wrap up so we can go to lunch. To wrap up means to finish a discussion or meeting. So it's another way of saying, let's end this conversation so we can go to lunch. Let's wrap up.
Let's wrap it up.
Maybe your coworker says to you, he gave us actionable advice for the presentation. So here, he gave us advice. You're just adding actionable. This is advice that can be used quickly and practically. So it makes it sound very positive. Or maybe as you're presenting, you can say, I appreciate constructive criticism of my idea. Criticism is negative. It's negative commentary. But if you add on constructive criticism, it's still negative, but you're sharing that with the intention of improving something. So you're providing this negative feedback, but your goal is to help. So you have a positive goal. You're not doing it to be mean, like you see a lot of people in YouTube comments. They're just being mean. It's not constructive. Maybe someone says the proposal has room for improvement in the timeline of the deliverables. So room for improvement. This means there is opportunity to make something better. And notice you need the verb have. This has room for improvement. So maybe they'll give you some constructive criticism. Now let's review some phrases for workplace socializing. Of course, you want to get to know the people you work with in a more casual social environment. So you might say, want to grab coffee after the meeting? Now notice this sounds more casual. I'm dropping do you, which is very commonly done, and I'm just starting with the verb. Want to grab coffee. So to grab coffee, this means to go get coffee and is often used socially.
You want to go grab a coffee?
Or maybe you suggest to your coworker, let's take a coffee break at 10 or a specific time. So a coffee break, this is of course a short break to have coffee. So if you just say, let's take a break, well, maybe you just sit there stuck on your phone or you check your email. But a coffee break, there's the expectation you will leave your desk and get coffee. So it's more social. And at any point, if you want to socialize with anyone at work, including your boss and more senior people, just ask them, how's your day going so far? How's your day going so far? This is casual, but it's friendly and absolutely appropriate even in a formal situation. And this simply is to ask someone about the status of something. Now, in this case, the something was, how's your day going so far? But you could replace your day with, how's the project going so far? How's the report going so far? Or again, anytime you want to strike up a conversation, which means to start a conversation, you can ask, what's going on? What's going on with? And then something. What's going on with the conference? So this is to ask about the status of something. And now, if someone asks you, how's your day going so far? And you want to reply simply, but naturally, you can say, pretty good. Can't complain, can't complain. This is a neutral or positive response to how are you or how's it going? Because if you can't complain, it means that there are no problems, there's no difficulty, there's no issues. So it's either neutral or it can be positive. Can't complain.
I can't complain.
Or if you see a client or a coworker that you haven't seen in a long time, you can say, hey, long time no see. Long time no see. And then you could ask them, how have you been? How have you been? Because it's the present perfect, you're asking about the past until now, rather than just saying, how are you, which focuses on now. And of course, long time no see, this is said when you haven't seen someone for a long time, and it's just acknowledging that. Now let's review some phrases for workplace events and time off. Maybe someone asks you, have you RSVP'd for the company picnic? Have you RSVP'd? This is a verb, to RSVP, but notice I have that apostrophe D. That's to show the verb is in the past simple. That's used when you have an acronym, like in this case. Have you RSVP'd? So you add a soft D. And this means to respond to an invitation to confirm if you will attend. So you RSVP by saying, yes, I will, or no, I won't. Or maybe someone asks you, can you do a head count before lunch if you're planning the company picnic or any other event? So to do a head count, this means you literally count how many heads there are because every person has one head. So it's to count how many people will attend. You don't actually have to count their heads, you just count one person. Or maybe you say to your coworker, I'm taking the day off tomorrow. So I'm taking the day off. To take time off, this means to not go to work. Now, maybe because you have a medical appointment, maybe family is visiting, maybe you just want a day to relax, whatever the reason is.
Take the day off with me.
But it's not usually because you're sick, because we have a different expression. You would say, I had to call in sick on Monday. I had to call in sick on Monday. So here, to call in sick. This is when you tell your boss you're sick and cannot come to work. Now, although it uses the verb call, you could text or write an email, but the phrase is the same. Now, if you did take some time off, maybe you say, my time off really helped me recharge my batteries. So to recharge one's batteries, in this case, my batteries, and batteries is always in the plural, it means to rest and regain energy, which is exactly what a day off can do for you. Or maybe you tell your coworker, we're heading to the cottage for the long weekend. So we're heading to, this is another way of saying we're going to, and for the long weekend. So of course, you know, the weekend in North America is Saturday, Sunday. A long weekend, so adding long before weekend, this is a weekend extended by a public holiday. Most likely it's Monday is the holiday, but sometimes it's Friday. So a long weekend would become Saturday, Sunday is your regular weekend, and then Monday is a public holiday, so you don't have to work, and that's a long weekend because you get 3 days instead of 2. Woohoo!
So have a great long weekend.
Now maybe you say, I need to use up my vacation days by the end of the year. So your vacation days, it could be singular. Maybe you just have one vacation day. This is the number of paid days off you are entitled to. So you may have a contract or an agreement. Paid days off. That is a vacation day. You get to relax at home in your pajamas and you still get paid. How awesome is that? I don't get any vacation days because I work for myself. Let's review some phrases you can use to talk about performance or motivation. She hit the ground running on her first day. Do you know this one? To hit the ground running. This means to start a job quickly and effectively.
I'm gonna hit the ground running.
Or maybe you say the manager set the tone for open communication. Open communication means you are welcome to communicate freely. To set the tone, this means to establish the mood or style for something. And in this case, it's open communication. You can just come give me constructive criticism and I welcome it. It's open communication. Or maybe you say, I'm still getting acquainted with the new process. So to get acquainted with something, this means to become familiar with people or systems. How about this? Consistent positive reinforcement keeps the team motivated.
It's about offering positive reinforcement.
So positive reinforcement. This represents encouragement by highlighting strengths. That's the positive part. Or maybe you say, she always goes the extra mile for her clients. To go the extra mile. This means to do more than is required. So it's a very positive thing. Or maybe you tell your boss, we worked late yesterday and now we're ahead of schedule. Oh, this is a positive thing. I love being ahead of schedule. So to be ahead of schedule, this means to finish a task or project earlier than the planned time. It's a very positive thing. Or how about this? He took initiative and solved the issue before it got worse. So to take initiative, take is your verb that you conjugate. This means that you act without being told or waiting for permission. So if you see that there's a problem, but your boss is busy with something, you just go solve the problem and then you tell your boss that you solved it. You don't wait for your boss to come give you permission. You just do it. And that's a very positive quality as well. Wow, you have already learned so much. Now let's keep going and focus on economic vocabulary so you feel confident understanding and discussing important world issues. Supply and demand. This is a noun. They're commonly used together, but they can be used separately. Supply and demand is the balance between product availability, supply, and consumer desire, demand, which affects price. And that's why it's important, because supply and demand often determines price. You see this with housing prices, with real estate. Housing prices are soaring because demand is high, people want houses, but supply is low. There aren't available houses.
So this year we've seen soaring prices and a sharp increase in sales.
Now notice the verb I used, soaring. The verb to soar means to rise quickly and dramatically. The verb is often used in economic news. Using this verb, you can say my English confidence is soaring, and that's hopefully what you're thinking and what these lessons help you do. So if you're thinking that, put that's right, put that's right in the comments. Let's talk about inflation. This is a noun, and it means rising prices that reduce the value of money. So if you have $100 under your bed, in 3 years from now, that $100 could be worth less because overall prices are higher. So that $100 will buy you less things. That's because of inflation.
Congress should be focused on keeping inflation in check.
Generally, people say in day-to-day conversations, everything costs more now. Inflation has made groceries and rent much pricier. Notice to be pricey, but in my example, I used the comparative pricier. So to be pricey, this simply means expensive. So much pricier means more expensive. Now let's talk about deflation. We have inflation and deflation. This is also a noun. It means falling prices, often due to weak demand. Now deflation, falling prices, it might sound good in theory, but it usually means businesses are struggling. So it isn't a good concept for the overall economy. Now, recession. You hear this every day in the news, and people discuss this concept. This is a period of economic decline with job losses and slower growth. Growth in the overall economy. You can say hiring freezes and layoffs suggest we might be heading into a recession. So notice that phrasal verb, to head into. This means to go into, so it means entering a recession. Now, a hiring freeze, this is a temporary stop on hiring new employees. Layoffs, this represents job loss due to company cutbacks. Let's talk about the concept of boom and bust. They are also commonly used together, but it's not required. A boom is rapid economic growth. A bust is a sudden downturn, so a sudden decline. Tech companies performed very well, thrived during the boom, the period of economic growth, but now many are going under in the bust. So to go under, this means to fail, to permanently close. Section 2, market and trade terms. Let's talk about a free market. This is an economy where prices and businesses operate with little government control. In a free market, competition keeps prices fair, but it can also lead to monopolies. A monopoly, this is when one company dominates a market with no competition, and this is not good for overall economic growth.
Is a plethora of choice necessary in a free market? I believe it is both a good and bad thing.
Now, tariffs, you hear this a lot in the news right now. This is a noun, and tariffs are taxes. They're taxes on imported goods, often to protect local businesses. Now, I said you hear this a lot in the news right now. At the time of this recording, Donald Trump is threatening to impose tariffs on many countries, including my country, Canada, and Mexico. Now, notice I use to impose a tariff. This is to officially force a rule, tax, like a tariff, or a punishment. Now, I also used the word imports. So let's talk about imports and exports. Of course, imports are goods brought into a country, and exports are goods sold abroad, exiting the country. Electronics are the country's main import, so that's the noun form, and sugar is its primary export. Notice I use main and primary. They're interchangeable and commonly used with import and export. Now, you can also use the verb form, and you can say the US imports a lot of oil. So notice it has that S because it's the present simple conjugated with the subject, the US, third person singular. The US imports a lot of oil while it exports agricultural products like corn. So oil is entering the country, corn is exiting the country. Let's talk about trade deficit and trade surplus. So a trade deficit happens when a country imports more than it exports. And then a trade surplus, well, it's the opposite. It's when a country exports more than it imports. So the country's trade deficit is growing because it buys more from other nations than it sells.
That we have a food trade deficit and food trade surplus at the same time. We ship cheap food out into the world, and we got to reach beyond our borders to import the food that's most important to human health.
Let's talk about a bubble. This is a noun. So a bubble is when asset prices rise far above their true value. The real estate bubble burst in the US in 2008. Did you read about that? Now, notice I used burst. In my sentence, it is a verb, but it can also be used as a noun. And to burst or a burst is the sudden collapse of those inflated prices. So inflated means they're bigger than they should be, and then burst is when they go back down to a smaller size. Section 3, business and investment. Let's talk about a market crash. This is a sudden and sharp drop in stock prices. So the 2008 market crash wiped out billions in retirement savings. You can also say the 2008 market crash happened when the real estate bubble, the inflated prices, when that bubble burst. So when it quickly collapsed.
Frankly, I think before the market crash of 2008, many Americans looked at Social Security as, it's greens fees. I'll take it at 62, so what if it's reduced? It's no big deal.
Now, of course, the stock market. This is the place where shares of companies, so a share represents ownership in a company, a share of companies are bought and sold. The stock market dropped today, or the stock market rose today. You can use both of those. And every day the stock market does both. It drops and it rises, usually like this every day. Now let's talk about a bull market and a bear market. Have you heard these terms? A bull market is when stock prices trend up over time. So it's not just today. It's over a period of time. So this represents a strong economy. A bear market is when stock prices trend down over time. So not just for a day or a week, it's a longer period of time. It's a trend. You can say investors made huge profits during the bull market, but now we're in a bear market and stocks are crashing. So to crash, this is a sudden and sharp decline.
I can tell you, we've had a 6-year bull market. There are a lot of bull market geniuses out there right now who have just been piling into the most speculative stocks, and they've been rewarded for that.
Let's talk about consumer spending. This is the money people spend on goods and services. It's a key part of the economy. Now, when inflation goes up, consumers generally spend less. So you can say consumer spending shrank during Q1, but is expected to bounce back, improve, recover by Q3. Do you know what I mean by Q1 and Q3? Well, first let's talk about to shrink. This means to reduce in size or amount. And for Q1, Q3, this represents the fiscal year. The fiscal year, which is 12 months, but it's not the calendar year. The fiscal year is generally divided into 4 quarters, and those quarters are Q1, 2, 3, Q4, and each lasts 3 months. So Q1 represents January, February, March, if you use the calendar year as your fiscal year, which isn't a requirement. So let's talk about credit. This is money borrowed that must be repaid, and often with interest. So you can buy a house or a car on credit. Now, higher interest rates make it more expensive to buy a car or a house on credit. Section 4, employment and wages. Let's talk about the unemployment rate. This is often in the news. This is the percentage of people who are jobless but looking for work. So retired people, children, they are not in the unemployment rate because they aren't looking for work. You can say the unemployment rate dropped last month, showing signs of job market recovery. So it's a positive thing when the unemployment rate goes down, drops. Now, the job market, this is the availability of jobs and the competition for them. For example, with so many layoffs, the job market is getting tougher for new graduates. Remember, we already discussed layoffs. This is job loss due to company cutbacks. So companies aren't spending as much money.
The 2 fastest growing occupations in the entire job market are solar panel installers and wind turbine technicians.
Now let's talk about the cost of living. This is the amount of money needed to cover basic expenses like housing and food. So you can say the rising cost of living driven by inflation is making it harder for many families to afford basic necessities like groceries, rent. So notice I use to be driven by. This is very common in economic news. To be driven by, this means to cause something to happen. Let's talk about the concept of productivity. This is the amount of work produced in a given time. So productivity is a general term, but in the context of the economy, it's the amount of work produced. For example, companies are investing in AI to boost worker productivity, so boost, increase, and cut costs. So to cut costs means to reduce or eliminate costs. Now let me share a common idiom with you, which you might know, which is to make ends meet. This is to earn just enough to cover expenses, but not anything additional. So you don't have a lot of additional consumer spending. So you can say with inflation causing the cost of living to soar, to increase suddenly, many families are struggling to make ends meet, are struggling to cover their basic necessities. Section 5, policies and government. Do you know what the concept of monetary policy is? Well, this relates to central bank decisions. For example, setting interest rates. And they do this to control inflation and growth. So for example, you see things in the news like the Federal Reserve raised interest rates, so they made them higher as part of its monetary policy to fight inflation. Now let's compare this to fiscal policy. Fiscal policy represents government decisions on taxation and public spending to manage the economy. So you can say the government is using fiscal policy to stimulate growth by cutting taxes. So it's their decision on how to manage their resources.
The present over the future, including fiscal policy and what would be the equivalent of monetary policy, Rome's understretch over a period of time led to its rot far more than its military adventure.
Now, of course, taxes, you know what this is. This is money collected by the government from individuals and businesses. So here are some phrases that you, as a consumer, need to know. When are taxes due? Because you need to pay your taxes. When are taxes due? When is the deadline, so the final date, the deadline to file taxes, to submit taxes? So you can use to submit taxes, but we commonly use the verb file, to file taxes. Now let's talk about national debt. This is the total money a government owes. So it's the debt, the amount owing. There can be consumer debt, personal debt, but national debt is what your country owes. So you can say the national debt is soaring, increasing sharply, as the government borrows heavily to cover its budget deficit. So a deficit or a budget deficit, this is when spending exceeds revenue. Now, let me share another idiom, to be in the red or to be in the black. So both of these use the verb to be and in the. So notice that sentence structure. If you're in the red, it's bad. You're losing money. That's why a lot of companies will say, we're bleeding, because red, blood, and it's gushing out of them. It's like money is leaving them. We're bleeding, we're in the red. In the black, that's positive. It means the company is profitable. So you can say after years of being in the red, so remember, you need the verb to be. In this case, it's conjugated in the gerund form because our preposition of. After years of being in the red, the new technology helped the company cut costs, reduce costs, eliminate costs, and move into the black. So we commonly use the phrasal verb to move into to talk about the transition from one category to the other. Now this may be a lesson you need to review again and again because these terms may be new to you and may be intimidating, but I promise, watch it again, review the lesson PDF. You can get it in the description, and I know you will have no difficulty understanding these concepts when you see them in the news or when your family, your coworkers, your friends are discussing economic issues because they affect all of us. So do you want me to keep helping you understand and learn advanced vocabulary? If you do, put let's go in the comments. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And here's another lesson I know you'll love. Make sure you watch it now.